While Western automakers negotiate tariff agreements and politicians debate trade policy, a fundamental industrial transformation has already occurred beneath the surface of the global economy. It did not arrive with dramatic announcements or geopolitical summits. It came through 2 decades of systematic execution. China now controls approximately 69% of global electric vehicle battery manufacturing. It processes nearly 60% of the world's lithium and 80% of its cobalt. Companies like CATL and BYD don't merely assemble battery cells. They manufacture everything from semiconductor chips to raw material processing in-house, achieving cost structures that Western legacy manufacturers cannot match mathematically. This is not a story about subsidies or unfair competition. This is the story of how the battery became the new barrel of oil, and how one nation secured control over the infrastructure that will power the next century of transportation. To understand why major Western economies are suddenly opening their doors to Chinese electric vehicles, we have to start underground. The foundation of China's dominance rests not in automotive engineering but in mining operations thousands of miles from Beijing. Australia leads the world in raw lithium extraction, producing approximately 60,000 tons of lithium carbonate equivalent annually. Chile follows with 35,000 tons. China itself mines only 25,000 tons. On the surface, this would suggest a distributed supply chain, where no single nation holds decisive advantage. But here's the critical distinction. Mining lithium is different from processing it into battery-grade materials. That conversion, technically complex and capital-intensive, occurs predominantly within China's borders or through Chinese-operated facilities. While Australia digs lithium from the ground, Chinese refineries transform it into the compounds that power electric vehicles. The market dynamics reveal how this control translates into leverage. Lithium carbonate spot prices in China moved from $8,259 per ton in June 2025 to $13,003 per ton by November, a 57% increase in 5 months. This price movement reflected not merely supply and demand pressures, but strategic behavior by Chinese producers. When prices fell earlier in 2025, major Chinese mines operated by companies including CATL paused operations, deliberately tightening supply to support prices. Industry analysts project lithium supply will shift from a small surplus in 2025 to a deficit of 1,500 tons by 2026, with deficits continuing through the decade. Global demand could reach 4.6 million tons by 2030, driven by electric vehicles, grid storage, and heavy-duty transport. These supply-demand dynamics favor producers with existing processing infrastructure and access to low-cost capital. Competitive advantages China has methodically consolidated over 2 decades. If lithium presents a distributed supply challenge, cobalt represents near-total concentration. The Democratic Republic of Congo produces 80% of the world's cobalt. Chinese state-owned enterprises control 80% of total DRC output. Of the 10 largest cobalt mines in the world, 9 are located in DRC's southern Katanga region. 5 of those 10 operations are owned by Chinese companies. Chinese cobalt refineries account for 60 to 90% of global cobalt supply. This integration of DRC extraction with Chinese refining creates a vertically integrated supply chain spanning 2 continents and controlled by a single nation's strategic interests. When DRC implemented an 8-month export ban on cobalt in 2025, immediate market disruptions rippled through battery manufacturers worldwide. When Trafigura Group-backed Chimaf Resources attempted to escape Chinese ownership later that year, DRC blocked the transaction, reinforcing the dominance of Chinese interests in the cobalt supply chain. The United States has begun preliminary negotiations with DRC regarding a potential minerals for security agreement, US military support against armed groups in exchange for access to cobalt, copper, and lithium. But these diplomatic initiatives remain subordinate to the existing reality. Chinese companies already control the operations, the refining capacity, and the technical expertise. The US seeks merely to prevent total monopoly, not to establish competitive alternatives. Beyond battery minerals, China extended its dominance into rare earth elements essential for electric vehicle motors. In January 2025, China announced the strictest rare earth and permanent magnet export controls to date. Foreign firms now require Chinese government approval before exporting magnets containing even trace amounts of Chinese origin rare earth materials. Given China's dominance, roughly 70% of rare earth mining, 90% of separation and processing, and 93% of magnet manufacturing, these export controls create leverage across virtually all advanced manufacturing sectors dependent on electric vehicles or renewable energy technologies. The implications extend to defense. Rare earths are essential for F-35 fighter jets, submarine systems, missile guidance, and radar equipment. The new licensing framework applies automatic rejection to any rare earth applications for military purposes, allowing Chinese authorities significant discretion to delay or deny exports critical to US defense capabilities. This represents weaponization of the supply chain extending beyond economic competition into the strategic domain. The Made in China 2025 initiative, announced in 2015, established an explicitly ambitious framework for industrial transformation across 10 strategic technology sectors. The policy set 2025 as a key milestone toward positioning China as the world's leading manufacturing power by 2049. What distinguishes this strategy from conventional industrial policy is systematic coordination across state resources, private enterprise, and regional governments. This was not subsidy policy or protectionism. It was comprehensive mobilization designed to move China up the global value chain while reducing dependence on foreign technologies. By most quantitative measures, Made in China 2025 delivered exceptional results in green technology sectors. China now dominates key green technologies, controlling over 75% of global lithium-ion battery manufacturing, nearly 80% of solar module production, and the majority of global electric vehicle output. In electric vehicles specifically, Chinese firms captured the majority of global market share growth between 2015 and 2023. One of the most distinctive features of China's industrial ecosystem is mutual reinforcement across sectors and technologies. China's innovation system is not a collection of isolated verticals, but rather a web of overlapping, cross-pollinating ecosystems. Advances in lithium battery chemistry generate spillover benefits into electric vehicles, consumer electronics, and grid-scale energy storage systems, which in turn drive scale and innovation upstream in battery technology. The smartphone supply chain's maturation yielded expertise in compact displays, lightweight materials, and precision manufacturing, capabilities now directly benefiting the EV industry. This systemic interdependence creates what might be characterized as a compounding engine for industrial momentum. The result extends beyond faster scaling to encompass accelerated learning curves, lower costs, and greater capacity to iterate rapidly when market conditions shift. BYD's business model represents the most comprehensive example of vertical integration in the global automotive industry. Rather than functioning as a conventional automotive manufacturer integrated backward into battery production, BYD operates as a battery and technology conglomerate integrated forward into automotive production. BYD's operations span assembling cell phones and portable electronic devices, manufacturing electrified vehicles across multiple brands, and supplying large-scale energy storage systems for grid applications. This diversification provides multiple revenue streams while enabling rapid technology iteration. Innovations developed in smartphone battery technology can be rapidly deployed in automotive applications, creating learning curves that competitors spanning only automotive cannot match. Compared to conventional automakers reliant on extensive networks of external suppliers, BYD maintains tight control over supply chains spanning battery production, software development, and sourcing of raw materials. When battery material costs shifted or component availability tightened, BYD could rapidly adjust sourcing, manufacturing processes, and product specifications in ways that competitors dependent on supplier ecosystems could not match. The results speak clearly. BYD delivered 4.27 million vehicles in 2024, capturing 34.1% of China's passenger vehicle market. In 2025, BYD surpassed Tesla to become the world's largest EV seller, delivering 2.256 million pure battery electric vehicles and totaling 4.6 million vehicles including plug-in hybrids. The current battery market tells a story of Chinese dominance so complete that alternative suppliers have become niche participants. CATL maintains commanding global leadership with 38.2% of the global EV battery market share during January through November 2025, installing 400 gigawatt-hours of batteries. the only battery provider globally holding over 30% market share. BYD ranks second with 16.7% global market share and 175.2 gigawatt-hours. These two Chinese companies collectively control 54.9% of the global EV battery market. South Korea's LG Energy Solution maintains third place with 9.3% market share, down from 11.1% the previous year. Japan's Panasonic holds 3.7% share. The collective market share held by Korean and Japanese battery manufacturers declined to approximately 16% of the global total, a fraction of China's dominance. A critical technical shift underlies these market dynamics: the global transition toward lithium iron phosphate battery chemistry. LFP batteries use lithium iron phosphate as the cathode material, rather than nickel, manganese, cobalt combinations. LFP chemistry offers superior safety through excellent thermal stability, longer life cycle compared to other lithium-ion batteries, and dramatically lower cost since it doesn't depend on expensive cobalt. Chinese manufacturers including BYD and CATL invested heavily in LFP technology, pushing it into mainstream EV models. Tesla's decision to incorporate LFP batteries in their standard range vehicles marked major validation of the technology. LFP batteries now account for 60 to 70% market share in China's battery market. Within China's LFP category, CATL leads with 231.96 gigawatt-hours, powering 3.61 million vehicles, while BYD supplies 165.74 gigawatt-hours, enabling approximately 3.82 million vehicles. Chinese manufacturers control approximately 63% of the global LFP market, the fastest-growing battery segment. For consumers and fleet operators, LFP chemistry combined with Chinese manufacturing scale translates to battery costs approximately 10 to 25% lower than premium nickel-based alternatives. While Chinese manufacturers maintain overwhelming dominance in current-generation lithium-ion technology, they're equally aggressive in developing next-generation solid-state batteries. What industry participants describe as the holy grail of battery technology. China introduced its first national standard for solid-state EV batteries in January 2026. CATL and BYD have publicly committed to solid-state battery production timelines, positioning them at the forefront of next-generation technology. Both companies aim to begin producing solid-state batteries on a small scale around 2027, with mass production anticipated toward the end of the decade. The technical achievements already demonstrated suggest they may exceed these timelines. A pilot production line established by Dongfeng achieved 200 megawatt-hour annual capacity, with solid-state batteries demonstrating energy density of 350 watt-hours per kilogram and capable of supporting driving ranges exceeding 620 miles on a single charge. Trial production is expected in early 2026, with mass manufacturing anticipated for September 2026. Solid-state batteries offer potential energy densities 50% higher than current lithium-ion technology, enabling single charge ranges exceeding 900 miles while supporting charging times measured in minutes rather than hours. Whichever manufacturer achieves mass production first will capture decades of technological and cost advantages. Current trajectories suggest Chinese manufacturers intend to be that first mover. The cost advantage of Chinese EVs extends beyond manufacturing efficiency to encompass an entirely different value proposition. In China, the average battery electric vehicle costs $25,465, roughly 3% less than the average gasoline-powered car. This represents a historic inversion of pricing dynamics. In contrast, in Germany, the average EV costs $63,837 compared to $47,558 for a gasoline car, a 34% premium. In the United States, EVs average $60,465 versus $46,395 for gasoline cars, a 31% price premium. These pricing differentials reflect not merely wage or regulatory cost differences, but the compounding effects of industrial scale, supply chain integration, and manufacturing innovation. Battery production in China costs approximately $84 per kilowatt-hour compared to $121 per kilowatt-hour in North America and $132 per kilowatt-hour in Europe. The The selection of vehicles available reflects these cost economics. For pure electric vehicles priced under $40,000, the United States offers only 4 models with an average range of 170 miles. In China, 130 models are available at equivalent price points with average range of 240 miles. This represents not merely a difference in vehicle availability, but a complete divergence in the EV market structure. Chinese automakers have fundamentally altered the pace of vehicle development compared to Western legacy manufacturers. XPeng developed 5 distinct vehicle platforms in 9 years. In contrast, Volkswagen announced its MEB architecture in 2019, launched PPE in 2025, while SSP remains scheduled for 2028 through 2029. BYD typically completes vehicle platform development in 14 to 18 months, compared to 36 to 48 months for Western legacy manufacturers. The difference reflects not merely efficiency gains, but fundamentally different approaches to engineering, supply chain coordination, and manufacturing flexibility. When BYD's leadership indicated that technology differentiation was eroding in smart cockpit and driver assistance features, the company responded by reorganizing engineering efforts to develop technologies surpassing the Blade battery and DMI superhybrid within 2 to 3 years. This capacity for rapid technological repositioning reflects organizational flexibility that legacy manufacturers find nearly impossible to replicate. China's electric vehicle market has undergone a fundamental transformation. EV market penetration in China jumped from 6.3% of total car sales in 2020 to approximately 50% or higher in late 2025, with new energy vehicle penetration, including plug-in hybrids, exceeding 50% for consecutive months starting in October 2025. The scale is staggering. Chinese EV market revenue will reach $377.9 billion in 2025, with steady growth expected to push this to $419 billion by 2029. China exported over 1.25 million EVs in 2024 and 1.05 million units in 2025. The Chinese EV market now accounts for over 70% of global EV production. Within China's market, Chinese brands have consolidated dominant market share. Chinese brands captured nearly 2/3 of all passenger car sales in 2025, up from approximately 40% in 2021. German brands declined from around 20% to roughly 17%. Japanese brands dropped from nearly 20% to around 15%, and American brands slipped to approximately 10%. This domestic market dominance provides the scale foundation, enabling Chinese manufacturers to achieve cost structures unattainable by competitors producing at lower volumes. The imposition of massive tariffs by the United States and European Union on Chinese EVs represents not a successful defense strategy, but rather an explicit acknowledgement that Western manufacturers cannot compete on cost, technology, or speed in an open market. The United States imposed 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, effectively blocking all imports, while simultaneously raising base tariffs on all imported vehicles and auto parts to 25% beginning April 2025. The European Union initially imposed tariffs ranging from 17% to over 35% on Chinese battery electric vehicles. However, by January 2026, the EU shifted strategy, releasing guidance for a price undertaking framework, allowing Chinese manufacturers to commit to minimum price floors rather than facing full tariff barriers. This shift from tariffs to price floors represents pragmatic acknowledgement of reality. The EU recognized that tariffs designed to protect European automakers were simultaneously inflating prices for European consumers and potentially derailing the EU's ambitious goal of banning internal combustion engine sales by 2035. The new price floor mechanism allows Chinese manufacturers like BYD, SAIC, and Geely to plan long-term regulatory certainty while avoiding the price-distorting effects of subsidy offsetting tariffs. Analysts suggest this move could lead to 20% annual growth in Chinese EV exports to Europe over the next 2 years. Chinese brands captured 12.8% of Europe's EV market in November 2025, the highest level ever recorded, despite the 17 to 35% tariff barriers. This outcome suggests tariff protection functions to delay rather than prevent Chinese market penetration. Canada's January 2026 announcement of reduced tariffs on Chinese EVs demonstrates how Trump administration hostility toward Canadian trade relationships paradoxically pushed Canada toward independent engagement with China. Prime Minister Mark Carney's trip to Beijing announced a preliminary but landmark deal allowing up to 49,000 Chinese EVs annually at the most favored nation tariff rate of 6.1%, with the quota rising to 70,000 by year 5. In exchange, China agreed to reduce retaliatory tariffs on Canadian canola from a combined 85% rate to approximately 15% by March. Ontario Premier Doug Ford expressed opposition, claiming the tariff drop would threaten the Canadian auto sector. However, Carney dismissed these concerns, noting that Chinese EV imports represent single-digit proportions of Canada's annual auto market of approximately 1.8 million vehicles. The political calculus shifted decisively when Western Canadian farmers demanded relief from retaliatory tariffs on agricultural products, creating internal political pressure more acute than concerns from Ontario's legacy automakers. Most significantly, it demonstrates how unilateral US protectionism creates incentive structures pushing allied nations toward independent engagement with major competitors, potentially fragmenting the unified trade barriers the US sought to maintain. China's EV exports experienced explosive growth in 2025 and into early 2026. China's EV exports jumped 87% year-over-year to nearly 200,000 units in November. Chinese EV exports surged 21% overall in 2025, with over 7 million vehicles shipped outside of China, predominantly EVs and plug-in hybrids. Mexico emerged as an unexpected export gateway. In November alone, Mexico imported 19,344 Chinese electric vehicles, marking a 2,300% surge year-over-year and making it the top destination for Chinese EV exports that month. With the US imposing 100% tariffs on Chinese EVs, Mexico maintained looser trade barriers, creating an attractive entry point into North America's broader automotive ecosystem. Chinese automakers achieved a historic milestone in 2025, surpassing Japan for the first time in over 2 decades in global vehicle sales. Chinese automakers are projected to sell around 27 million vehicles globally in 2025, exceeding Japan's output by a substantial margin. For every 100 vehicles sold globally, 71 were produced in China as of late 2025. When combined with the maturation of Chinese automotive technology and quality, this production dominance means the center of global automotive innovation and manufacturing has shifted decisively to China. Industry projections suggest Chinese EV dominance will deepen over the next decade. Global EV sales are projected to reach 40 to 50% of total car sales by 2030, with battery pack prices potentially declining to $80 to $99 per kilowatt-hour by 2026, enabling cost parity between EVs and gas-powered vehicles. This pricing convergence will accelerate EV adoption across all market segments, yet Chinese manufacturers' established cost structure advantages suggest they will capture the highest volume growth in these expanding markets. Chinese EV makers are positioned to capture 40 to 50% of the global EV market by 2030. Western OEMs face what might be described as a structural impossibility in the EV transition without fundamental reorganization. The cost gap between established players and Chinese new entrants is growing, despite conventional assumptions about convergence. Global demand for vehicles remains constrained at roughly 1 to 1.5% growth through 2035, even as Chinese manufacturers gain market share, meaning established OEMs must justify manufacturing investments against stagnant demand. BCG analysis suggests that Chinese companies can produce high-quality cars for about 1/3 the cost of established Western manufacturers, a disadvantage that tariffs can slow but not reverse. Established automakers operate with production complexity and cost structures that Chinese competitors have engineered away. Legacy manufacturers require payback periods of 2 years or less for new manufacturing investments, constraining their ability to implement transformative production redesigns, requiring multi-year capital absorption. Many incumbents are cash-strapped and lack means to invest in new manufacturing technologies. The shift to electric vehicles has removed engineering advantages that benefited traditional OEMs, enabling streamlined manufacturing and greater automation that Chinese companies leverage more effectively. The next phase of Chinese competitive advantage extends beyond battery technology and manufacturing scale into artificial intelligence-driven manufacturing systems and semiconductor integration. Great Wall Motors introduced the GWM1 platform, described as the world's first native AI-driven full powertrain automotive architecture. This platform accommodates various powertrain configurations while embedding advanced AI functionalities to enhance performance and efficiency. The platform supports 900-volt high-voltage systems with high-rate battery cells and peak charging capabilities exceeding 600 kilowatts with bidirectional power discharge functionality. BYD similarly invested in AI-driven manufacturing systems, with CEO Wang Chuanfu emphasizing how artificial intelligence drives EV production scaling and efficiency enhancement. The global semiconductor market will approach $700 billion in 2025 and surpass $1 trillion in 2026, representing year-on-year growth of more than 40%. The structural shift toward AI across manufacturing, data centers, and cloud computing creates demand that sustains double-digit growth trajectories through 2027. As 2026 unfolds, the AI PC transition and embedded compute integration within vehicles create new layers of demand that Chinese manufacturers can address through their established supply chains and manufacturing expertise. The global electric vehicle market has undergone a transformation, extending far beyond automotive competition to encompass fundamental restructuring of global manufacturing, supply chain control, and technological leadership. China has consolidated this dominance not through accidental advantage or temporary policy support, but through systematic, multi-decade execution of integrated industrial strategy, establishing commanding positions across every critical layer of the EV supply chain. From rare earth mining and processing through lithium production, battery manufacturing, vehicle assembly, to emerging solid-state battery development and AI-integrated manufacturing systems, Chinese companies and coordinating government institutions have created vertical integration spanning continents and decades of industrial development. The evidence presented throughout this analysis suggests that Western tariff policies, while appearing protective, ultimately represent accommodations to established realities rather than meaningful barriers to Chinese market penetration. The EU's shift to price floor agreements, Canada's reversal of 100% tariffs, and Mexico's emergence as a Chinese export hub all demonstrate how trade barriers function to delay rather than prevent Chinese market entry. The underlying drivers of Chinese competitive advantage, integrated supply chains, manufacturing scale, cost structure discipline, and technological innovation pace, remain operative regardless of tariff levels. For the global clean energy transition, this Chinese dominance carries both acceleration and concentration implications. The dramatic cost reductions in EV batteries and vehicles produced at Chinese scale enable electrification timelines that would be impossible if Western manufacturers maintained pricing power. Chinese manufacturing efficiency creates the cost structure necessary to achieve price parity between EVs and combustion engine vehicles, driving the demand acceleration necessary for the energy transition to proceed at required pace. Simultaneously, the concentration of supply chain control in Chinese hands creates geopolitical vulnerability and dependency relationships that Western nations have only begun to recognize. Control over cobalt, lithium, rare earths, and manufacturing capacity creates leverage, extending beyond commercial competition into strategic domains, affecting defense capabilities and technological sovereignty. The strategic mineral supply chain has become as critical as energy security was in the 20th century, yet Western nations remain dependent on Chinese processing capacity, despite controlling some raw material sources. The trajectory visible from current competitive dynamics and technical capabilities suggests that the next phase of Chinese industrial leadership will extend into solid-state batteries, AI-integrated manufacturing, and advanced semiconductor integration in vehicles and energy systems. By the time Western manufacturers complete the organizational transformations necessary to compete on cost and technology in the EV sector, Chinese manufacturers will have advanced into next-generation technologies, establishing new competitive barriers. And just think about it. When battery production costs $84 per kilowatt-hour in China versus $132 per kilowatt-hour in Europe, when Chinese manufacturers complete platform development in 14 months versus 36 months for Western competitors, when CATL alone controls 38% of global battery supply, these are not gaps that close through incremental improvements or temporary policy interventions. The implications are profound and irreversible. The global auto industry's center of gravity has shifted to China, not temporarily but structurally. The engineering and manufacturing capabilities that enabled Japanese automotive dominance in the 1980s and 1990s are now concentrated in China and increasingly embedded in supply chains of such complexity and geographic distribution that alternative configurations would require decades to replicate. The battery has indeed become the new barrel of oil, and China controls both the wells and the refineries in a concentration that will shape global competition, climate policy, and geopolitical alignments for decades to come. As we take the world as it is, not as we wish it to be, the question is not whether Chinese dominance in electric vehicles will continue. The question is how the rest of the world adapts to this new industrial reality, and what leverage remains available to nations that arrived too late to the most consequential supply chain transformation of the 21st century. Thank you for joining me. Like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to seeing you here tomorrow. Bye for now.